Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining. I can see we've got Craig, Kaylee, Luke, Paul, and Steve in the chat. Whilst we wait for some other attendees to turn up, I just thought I'd welcome you in and say I hope everyone's safe and well, and I hope that you can hear me loud and clear. So I'm Simon, I'm the Managing Director of HUT6, and during these relatively stressful times in lockdown, we've been taking the opportunity to refocus our internal practices, as I'm sure you're all taking the opportunity to, with possibly a new remote workforce and new challenges faced every day. And part of that for us has been launching a webinar series designed to address how our solution can work better and what are our practices internally. And in fact, how are we even growing that security culture within HUT6 itself, whilst we don't have that immediate access to everyone around the office. During the session, you're all muted by default. However, if you'd like to speak, you can raise your hand and I'll see that in the chat on my right. As well, there's a Q&A function that we're going to be using today. So if there's anything that I say that sparks disagreement or you'd like to raise a query around, just whack that in the Q&A and I'll see it and get around to it, either addressing it live or possibly coming into it at the end once I've been through the various things we want to address today. So today, as you can see on my screen, I've got no slide deck. It's not going to be death by PowerPoint, but just a set of contents that we're going to be going through today. Really, the session is focused around how we look at our campaigns in the past and what we can learn from and evolve them into and actually achieve the aims we set out initially with the program. So the first one is assessing your current maturity level, which is recognizing at what stage you are, and that needs to be a very honest appraisal. Then why and how we should benchmark ourselves, at what level do we set ourselves and what are we trying to get to and how are we going to arrive there? And then as I was writing it, I started thinking the best way to address this is blockers. With any awareness campaign or trying to convince people or change people's minds, it is generally it's the objections that are the main hurdle. So we're going to look at how those common mistakes arise and what solutions we can implement to avoid and sort of navigate our way through them. Hopefully that sounds appealing to you. As I was writing it, I did end up sort of spilling into 5 or 6 different documents. And at the end, we'll have a little poll to see what topics we should address next, what would be of greatest interest. And ultimately, we started this company 4 years ago to address human cybersecurity in a very intelligent and efficient way. And as we've developed that offering, so many different challenges have reared their ugly heads. We started off as just a software company. Now we're working towards becoming a proper security training company and implementing some of those changes into our service delivery. So today I want to focus solely on the evolving security awareness campaigns. So we're going to talk at a level where we've already implemented security awareness training. Ultimately, we all implement that program to protect our organization from human risk factors. And when we are trying to do that, we need to look at it from a perspective of the human risks are a huge attack vector with relatively low cost of solving, but high difficulty. The budget you need for this sort of activity is not huge, but it is employee time. And it's part of that working intelligently and effectively that will allow us to reduce that time and take a multi-pronged approach to develop security awareness. With this session, I also will try and cover different things we've learned from our experience in delivery. But not all of these have been challenges faced by our customers. Some of them are just, in fact, more broader lessons learned as we started to develop the solution before we got it into the working model. So we first need to know what good looks like. The reason we're implementing these awareness programs is to reduce risk of breaches, attacks, and ultimately loss from data breaches. That needs to be our goal and at the center of everything that we're doing. If our awareness campaign, a lot of these suggestions I'll be putting forward here are about specificity and trying to narrow down why we're doing what we're doing. The maturity model that the SANS Institute originally talked about and started publishing is a 5-step maturity model for security awareness, and I'm going to take you through the different 5 steps in that model and analyze where we think people will typically lie and what the main blockages in that pipeline are. Good for us at Hut 6 is all about secure culture. When we're successfully changing behaviors and having a palpable impact on that risk, that's when you're really providing ROI to your stakeholders. And that's when you're properly within your organization, security is talked about and considered business as usual. And your employees are no longer a vulnerability, but they're actually starting to report things. You've got that visibility into the solution. And the steps you need to level up are, first of all, assessing honestly where you are at. Only you can work out which little piggy you are, whether your house is made of straw, whether your house is made of sticks, or whether your house is made of bricks. So the different stages that SANS talks about are, number 1, no awareness program, it's non-existent. This is a critical stage as you need to get right off the ground. There's a high risk of cyber attack or data leakage, and you're non-compliant, so you're risking regulatory fines, and also it'll be difficult in nowadays climate to properly operate up and down the supply chain, as people are very focused on how their third-party suppliers are treating security and how they're approaching that. Second is the compliance focus. This is the main driver behind some of the behind some people's attitude to security awareness. Right, we need to be compliant. We need to tick off the GDPR lists, and we need to make sure that we've got our ISO 27001 and that we are doing cyber essentials and that we're on track with the NIST program. The issue here is the execution. So in this one, it's compliance focused. There's no strategic plan. There's minimum resources. It's an annual program. It'll often feel quite false and just taking a record of how often people do the training and whether or not they have completed it on time. This one is where your money is going. It's a low investment. You're not spending huge amounts of money on quality content, on good phishing simulations, on additional efforts around your awareness campaign. But ultimately, you're also not changing behaviors and not actively impacting your company's safety. The third level is where I think most people tend to lie. This is where you've identified which key topics and specific concerns your company has, and you're implementing an adaptive campaign that works off feedback. So you get everyone in a room that on your security team and possibly other stakeholders, you've identified why you're doing this, and you've got buy-in, and you're going to start doing the awareness program, but you only implement certain aspects, and it doesn't have, and we'll cover some of the pitfalls here. But this is the level at which you've got an awareness program. Maybe you're 2 or 3 years down the line, and this is what I really want to talk about here, is how we get from stage 3 to stage 4. And stage 4, good, is where we've got measured and structured process. We've got long-term sustained plans of how we're going to address awareness to our staff and to our team, and how we're going to measure and improve it. You've identified, specific areas that are weak, and then you build upon that. It avoids the repetition. It avoids drilling the same employees with what can feel like a compliance exercise, and the employees themselves can feel the value behind that. There is continuous improvement, and specific risks are addressed. And I think this is where we really want to get to. SANS advocates for a 5th level, which is a robust metrics framework. In my opinion, that can often be a little bit too meta when you're putting a lot of effort into ameliorating the system by which you are judging the original program. It can feel that's the end of the race. That's 10 years down the line, and that can take a very long time to get everyone in your organization on board. But what we really want to aim for at Hut 6 is that security feels like business as usual, that there is a attitude amongst your employees that says security is important to us, and I will choose to make those security behaviors habitual. And I think that's really where we want to be, is that security culture. And I'm going to talk now about what the struggles are getting from 3 to 4. So after you've, just to remind you, at level 3, you've got a year of training, maybe 2 years of training, you've got a rhythm, you've got some good content, Maybe you've done an initial launch event, but then it's a bit fire and forget. And we want to take it from fire and forget into a managed program that gets benchmarked and assessed as we go. At the start of that issue, and that whilst I was, again, while I was writing this, there was a phrase, I think it's wrongly attributed to Einstein, but it was, only a madman would do the same thing over and over and expect a different result. And if that's what you're doing to your employees, repeating the same edicts and maxims again and again without checking whether it's working and adapting that message, that's the stage, that's the Sisyphus stage that people would be in at number 3, where we want to be more intentioned and more strategic about how we manage that. So what are the goals of the program, the objectives, the scope, the KPIs for success, and who manages those security controls? As soon as awareness can become part of your broader security program, the easier that will become for you for managing that risk and making sure that the awareness part of your security plan actually does work. So the next stage then is benchmarking it. So we've assessed where we're at with number 3, sort of working out whether we sit at number 3 or number 4, and what are the good aspects of an awareness campaign. We now need to think about how we benchmark people. Thankfully, in cybersecurity, we're quite blessed that we're in a relatively unique discipline, and security can often be considered a partnership across different industries. Not many other industries do share tactics and strategies. For example, marketing. You wouldn't really see 2 marketing teams of potentially competitors getting together to compare a strategic campaign before release, and yet we see in sharing platforms and across national initiatives, cyber companies and cyber teams coming together to partner against the common enemy. And that's a lovely way to start benchmarking. However, when you're talking about awareness, not all risks were really created equal. Your organization is very specific, and you're talking about the soft touch, the people within that organization are going to be unique and different about how they feel about the company and the risks they're taking as compared to your colleagues and peers. So the metrics you collect may be quite different to the metrics that other organizations should collect. And that's where I think you need to, it takes time to build, but work out what people respond positively to in your organization. I'll do another session probably specifically about which metrics we need to pull out. But in terms of benchmarking yourself, it should really be you should think about it as a time trial rather than a head-to-head. Should be monitoring it inwards and benchmarking it against yourself and how you've performed in the past year. There are also many frameworks out there to compare your progress to. However, there isn't that much sophistication in those frameworks about security awareness. Often it just has one line that says you need an ongoing and adaptive security awareness program, or you need employees to understand the risks they face. And this is where I think you can use, often reports can be a useful source of information to highlight those risks and understand what you are facing or what your industry faces. So things like Verizon's Data Breach Investigations Report, or DCMS's survey, or even on the NCSC's CISP, Central Information Sharing Platform, that will help you understand what risks you're going to be facing. But I'm sure that's something that already exists within your team. It's just about centering the awareness campaign on those issues. So the common mistakes that hold us back. The first one we often see when we've implemented it in the past is that there's a lack of soft skills and marketing in the security team. Whilst you're partnered with a security awareness vendor maybe, or maybe you develop the training in-house yourself, you've designed it around specific risks, and those technical risks that are faced, such as maybe you are posed with a giant social engineering threat. If you're a very high touch business, customer facing, and you've got a lot of employees moving in and out, such as retail or hospitality. The training that will be implemented will be very technical and focused around those issues and trying to reduce the risk. But what can be lacking is the idea of thinking how that's going to come across. What's the soft touch? Have you got enough people behind the campaign? Have you got enough faces? And does it feel like a coordinated, structured campaign to your users? if you've got a face to the campaign as well as good internal support for curious users, and people know that it's not just IT or a faceless HR training initiative, then that can carry your campaign into its third and fourth years properly, as it's then championed by someone, by possibly someone on your board or someone who sits within your team who is visible and accessible. And that soft touch gives the campaign the legs it needs. So having that face and that released within internal comms, that face and that soft touch that prepares people for what you're trying to do, how you're going to do it, and why you're doing it. That will help you develop that campaign as it goes, because then you have that interface and that connectivity. A lot of the issues here we'll be talking about will be around communication and will be around the different levels of which you have that visibility and connectivity across your organization. The second one we've seen is lack of employee time. Obviously, everyone is incredibly busy within a security team, often understaffed, under-resourced. And these awareness campaigns, they do need management and attention. And often that can be deemed too precious. And then that will mean that the investment you have put in there is undermined. This can be mitigated to some extent by careful initial planning. If you have those moments at which you take the, where you go back and analyze, and it's not entirely fire and forget, but the danger here is that you set it up, spend a month on it, and then let it go and let some of that effort ebb and flow. There needs to be a coordinated structure to your plan, and ideally some full-time employee resource dedicated to that. I think there was a statistic that I read that over 75% of security awareness professionals are part-time, which means they spend less than half their time on security awareness. And that, I think, is one of the main blockers to taking your awareness campaign to the next level, because there isn't that hand on the rudder. There's no gentle adjustment as you go, or it's more, okay, the program isn't working, why isn't it working? Right, let's change what we're actually doing, rather than managing it as it navigates its way through the organization. One of the best ways that you can do that you can get around that is either hire specifically for it, but at a lower level, or a non-permanent role, such as getting a contractor in for internal comms, or possibly social science discipline interns from academia who are interested in those communication campaigns and have that expertise outside of your IT team. That can be quite gentle on the budget and help you properly implement it, as you have this one person who owns that, and they can help you build little tricks into your awareness campaign from their expertise. Alternatively, I'll come on to that later, but an ambassador program is also a great way of bypassing that lack of resource. Another challenge that people face is when they're blocked by internal departments. So there's quite a bit of competition across organizations, often between whether or not they have the internal bandwidth, whether or not they have the prowess to get their campaign into the mainstream and get it in front of employees and get that precious screen time with employees can be difficult to navigate. And typically security awareness is not the hottest topic for this. Cyber is a very nice and attractive subject, but security awareness can often feel like an interruption to people's processes. By designing your security awareness program in tandem with your security controls, you'll make it a lot easier for people to follow your lead. But to avoid blocking by internal departments, we often recommend getting a cross-department focus group involved from the very beginning. So the greatest success of programs we've seen have been bringing HR in, bringing operations in, and bringing IT into the same room at the beginning of the campaign, and giving them a little bit of ownership in the success of that program, making them understand what their role will be in achieving that success and changing behaviors. Another way of bypassing this internal department fracture is by one of the greatest successes we've seen is where people have put their line managers in charge of the metrics for their subsidiary employees. Then those line managers are directly responsible for the program month on month, and making sure that those lessons are learned and that it's getting the attention it needs and deserves. The converse of that issue is you're not being blocked by internal departments, but you're being given support, but there's no shared responsibility. So everyone's pro and cheering you on from the sidelines, but you haven't got the manpower or the actual, they don't have ownership on whether or not it's going to succeed. They're relying on you making it succeed, but they're all for it. That can be a bit of an empty, sort of taking the wind out of your sails, because ultimately you're going to need help in executing this. And it is a cross-department effort. Whilst security is your responsibility, there are aspects of the communication campaign that fall outside the remit of a security team. So for this strategy, again, the planning is key, getting people in the room early. And one of the things we recommend is having a notable face on the board that is the champion or figurehead of the campaign. Often hosting your own content alongside your training solution, or delivering a short video or a PSA to all your staff explaining what the value of the training is going to be and why we're going through this process will help advocates get on board, and will help you understand what your will help you understand why you're going through these changes in the organization, and also give that power behind your campaign, that it is not just IT and HR getting together and devising some corporate training to make you suffer. Instead, it's a board level decision that we need to reduce our human risk and change perceptions. And the leadership getting on board with that can be really helpful, as well as other things like sharing a leaderboard of departments to see who's doing well and who's not, as well as sharing your KPIs early on to say, this is what we want to achieve and this is what we have achieved. Can we make it better? So when you're running a phishing simulation, publishing that report on your internal comms may look like you're confessing to a very high, maybe a potentially high click rate, or maybe a potentially damaging report. However, the visibility and the actual measuring of that will make people either get competitive or realize that there is a real risk. In the congressional part, so a lot of those things, the three things I just talked about there, with the block by internal departments, lack of employee time, and external support but no shared responsibilities, are often indicative of siloed security efforts, and not getting it properly addressed at the board level, and not getting it as something that is built in rather than bolted on. And in fact, the Equifax, in the congressional report on the Equifax breach, it was revealed that the patch was actually, the exploit was known about, but wasn't patched because of the reporting structure and the siloing of those teams. And that's ultimately quite a human issue, is that we need to all have better communication across the board if we're going to make any meaningful change. So I've got a question in here that says, does the seniority of the champion affect the message? Depends what sort of champion you're going for, and whether or not it fits into your wider strategy. So there are two, I will talk about ambassador programs in a future webinar, but the seniority can be really helpful. In one of our clients, they delivered a CEO video at the beginning of the training that helped convince users that this is being taken seriously, that's being led from the front. And I think that affected uptake massively, because you see, okay, my boss is saying this is an important feature, and they're taking the time to create a video. And often it's about, can the employees feel the value that you've put into the security awareness program? If they can't, then you've got an issue, because the money you have put in won't be recognized. If you're going for a broader ambassador program where it's your neighbor telling you, you'll need more numbers, and you'll need to have a coordinated message to that. Often you can find keen volunteers who want to broaden their responsibilities and who have taken interest in technical explanations to their colleagues and who appreciate security awareness efforts. They are often few and far between, but if you can find and leverage them, they can be a powerful champion as well. So yeah, that's. I think we'll do an entire another webinar to talk about ambassador programs and how you can leverage those people, as they're quite a tricky thing to manage, and we've seen them work, we've seen them fall apart. So in some ways, if you get people on board early, you are at risk of losing them if there's a lull at any time. So making sure that they understand what their responsibilities are at the beginning and structuring their time properly so that you're using them to their greatest ability is how you'll make those work. Before I launch on with some more, are there any more questions coming through? No. Okay, I'll continue for the time being. So the next challenge that people often face can be, well, those are all operation conflicts. So talking about employee time, internal marketing bandwidth, and blocking from other departments, so make sure that it's integrated into your policy and your general stance as a company. Now I'm going to talk a bit more about why it might not convince your user, rather than why the campaign might not get onto its feet. We talk about a lack of urgency. The issue with the compliance stage of maturity is that the reason you're doing it is to pass an audit, or pass a cyber resilience audit, or avoid regulatory fines, or get into a specific bid for a supplier that you've been working for and they require a certain level of security. That can feel very unurgent, because all you're doing is using an argument that we don't want to be the lowest hanging fruit. We will put in just the minimum that we need to avoid getting caught out. But when that comes to people, they suddenly feel a lack of urgency. They will respond to that level of you're communicating the risk as being low because you're not putting the effort in that needs to be put in. And that can be a damaging mindset to start off your culture, that we don't take these risks seriously, or that we think that they're smaller than they are. This can be combated by using real examples for security breaches, so that that are close to home. So maybe you've run an audit, or you've run a social engineering test against your premise and your staff, and you share the results and say, based on these results, we need to run another awareness campaign, and build that up and get out from that lack of urgency and something we need to do to something we have to and should do because of these reasons. That's something that I think is all about tone. And when you're delivering the awareness campaign, you get those opening moments to announce it. You get possibly newsletters and blog posts that accompany the training that set the tone for the awareness training. And if you can preface each tutorial that you release, possibly, something that we've seen in our clients is when you're about to release a tutorial on specific topic, for example, malware, you talk about different types of malware that your company has engaged in a blog post. And that will be optional content. It won't get seen by everyone, but those that do will realize the reason why we're doing this, and it'll make them, turn them into minor advocates for your program. Another attitude that we see is a zero trust attitude. So it's giving up because someone's always going to click. And I think that takes the wrong mindset around security controls, because all security measures are just preventative controls. There's no impenetrable shield when it comes to technical measures. I don't know why awareness campaigns would be held up to an imaginary technical measure as having to be bulletproof, because often they can reduce your risk, and they can often provide a greater ROI with the effort put behind them than a technical solution that also has some gaps in its goals. So why are we doing these awareness programs? Because we can reduce the number of people that are likely to click, and it's all about a risk game, not about a total protection, because you're never totally safe from breaches, from data leaks, and there's always accidents that can happen. So reducing those accidents and the likelihood of those events is what we want to try and do. Equally, there's another one where if you think it's just about stopping people from clicking, then you're missing the bonuses and benefits that an awareness program can provide. You want to communicate that to your staff that it's also about reporting and having internal visibility on risks and understanding that, oh, we've seen this attack, we got this many phishing emails reported into our email address, we've seen this attack before. That's more ammo for our, not only is it more ammo for our awareness campaign and more examples to use, it is also, it reduces the fallout from breaches, and it reduces your incident report time. It reduces your the amount of time that cyber attacks will stay live, and you'll be able to take them down quicker, but also report them properly to the relevant authorities as you're required to do by different compliances. I think another stage in maturing an awareness program is differentiating between your risks. So deciding early on that this level of user needs a different level of training, this level of user needs less training, this user needs specific training. For example, the risk levels of a C-suite to you are much greater as they have a greater severity. However, you'd hope often that they would be slightly more robust against those threats. Not always the case, but they do require specific training on those threats that they're faced with, and that's often delivered best in-house alongside a training program. Other risks to think about would be contractors who come and go quite often, temporary employees, the threats of non-computer-based employees, if you have any, privileged users, those who travel in and out of the country. Those different training requirements. Not only does the specificity matter because they are unique risks, but also it will again be felt across your campaign that there are specific bits of training you need to take, and the requests will come into support. They'll say, oh, I'm going to be going abroad, I need to take the out of office training, and that will be indications that your campaign is being engaged with. It is a requirement, and it is part of the way you do business. And some have sterner policies. Some of our clients have sterner policies where it's you need to have achieved this level in the training to have this permission or this level of access or be allowed to go abroad. And some have slightly looser controls around what's done there. But as long as it is involved, as long as the training is considered part of the way you do business, then that's a far more mature campaign than if it's just a blanket cover our bases type awareness program. Most of these can be achieved in the planning stage, and then they need the ongoing management is where the value is reaped. So measuring the impact of your campaign and reporting on it will help keep the flames alive and take your users on a journey with you. I know that the third year of an awareness program can often be the straw that breaks the camel's back in terms of users' compliance, and that's where we recommend introducing new measures alongside it. So possibly doing social engineering audits, and possibly doing spot checks on office safety. Not so relevant right now that we're at home, but it will obviously become relevant again. But making sure that your IT team is engaged and security team is engaged as you go into the third year, and mixing it up a little bit, as you have to imagine that these users have been with you since day one, and that they will have seen and heard the same things that you have seen and heard, and you need to keep teaching them the same things, but making sure that your training and reinforcement is different and respects the level that the users have achieved in the past. The final three challenges that we've seen is not internally acknowledging breaches. So not leveraging your personal experience in a company because for fear that it'll damage your internal brand can often lead users to underestimate the risks that they're facing. If you can document and present the number and cost of human-related incidents, that can be absolutely invaluable, not only in convincing your board to support the ongoing program, but also convincing the people of the value and the continued necessity of the training that you're delivering. Then the last two we look at, I would say, are the most essential for how you're going to go away from this webinar and change what you're doing. So they are not documenting your strategy and program, so playing it a bit ad hoc. If there was no plan, or if there was a sort of a bare bones plan when you implemented your awareness campaign, it might be time to revisit it and work out what other activities would work well within our culture. Because if you rely on training alone, or just on phishing simulation alone, it'll become very apparent that security awareness knowledge is only to be applied in those instances. And when changing behavior, you can address all the motivators in the world. You can have the best content and the best arguments for secure behaviors, leveraging technical explanations, the financial stake that people face, the social influences, leveraging professional reasons to behave accordingly, and obviously the most potent ones are the personal arguments that people make, saying we protect your family, protect your home lives. All those arguments can be made with grace and eloquence, but you still need to provide people with opportunity and with ability. So it sounds a bit like the murder, but motive and opportunity. But it's crucial that you provide them the environment within which to behave securely. So that means accompanying your training program with newsletters, with blog posts, proper infographics, relevant statistics from your own security experience, the possibility of getting guest speakers onto your training platform. So maybe just doing a 30-second video to mix things up. As you do that annual refresh on your program and working out what's working and what's not, you could get another champion or another figurehead in to talk. Some people have reported that the audits have gone really well for them. Some people find that they're too intrusive. That will depend on your culture and what level and standard people are operating at. The biggest thing I want people to take away from today is that champions and stakeholders need to be actively engaged and given almost a to-do list or sort of a roadmap for what they're expected to do and how they're going to achieve compliance and above and beyond change behaviors, because the accompanying internal communications and feedback are the most crucial to making sure that your awareness program is worthwhile. Ensuring that users are engaging with the content, still taking it, and think that it is worthwhile is the only way you're going to be able to change behaviors. So I think that's the main takeaway is from this webinar, is that the stumbling blocks for an awareness campaign are adequately communicating your mission across the organization. What are you trying to achieve? Why are you doing it? And how? And whilst we need concise training that provides the exact curriculum and specific policies that we're going to be facing, it needs to be integrated with your auxiliary activities to feel effective and relevant, to then get the users to change their behaviors. As we go through this, metrics and feedback will help us understand if we're simply hammering that square peg into the round hole and just doing right, that band-aid will fix everything. But feedback and communication will help us understand what specific needs and challenges are faced by your business and why we're doing the awareness campaign. All right. Thank you very much. I've got another question here. What's more important, training or testing, or training through testing? Interesting. What's more important, training or testing, or training through testing? I think this comes back to setting up what, how, and why. And people need to understand those three aspects of your campaign before you launch it. And so the first thing people can do is benchmark and set off. And they go, right, everyone, here's an awareness test. Let's see how you do. And that's going to be a testing. And then they're going to train afterwards and then test again. We prefer at Hut 6 a more continuous model that treats the user as if they are watching a series, and you hit those moments of character development, or of, in this case, security awareness development, as you unfold the plot with them. So announcing the intentions and the reasons why at the beginning, and then testing once you've given those people the knowledge, seems to us fairer and seems to us a better way of introducing risk than by playing the test and then to sort of test people and then go, right, you all failed, we now need to do this, and as almost like a punishment. It can set up that sort of acid test and then fail or succeed, and then, you know, that branching path. But really also, ultimately, you will be the best commentator on what your organization needs, and your vendor or your partner in security awareness should be able to adapt to that, because not every company is used to the same methods of working. If in your company you have that culture of testing, sort of repeatedly testing, like an insurance company, for example, who are stats based entirely and will only take risks that are calculated, hopefully, then that will be instilled in you, and stats and metrics will be the most important to people. However, other businesses have different focuses, and it's about making sure that the awareness campaign's focus is aligned with your general business culture. Thank you for that question. If anyone else has any questions now, you can either raise your hand and I can answer them, or just answer them into the question and the answer. I'd also like to introduce at this stage a poll, because I did mention several times that we're going to be doing some other topics. If you could let me know what you'd be most interested in hearing about next as a follow-on from this talk. We'll be looking at probably doing these, I think, once a month, just to address how we're going to develop. If they get more popular, then we might do them more frequently, but just you should be able to see a poll on your screen now, which will let you vote on which topic you'd like to hear about most. The topics are security awareness metrics should I be using? That's about measurement and understanding whether or not you've been successful. Security awareness from home, that's a response to the COVID pandemic, and trying to work out how that's going to change users' attitudes. I think there's going to be a lot more personal arguments to be made and a lot more nuance to that. Creating the ambassador program, again, that's one of the key takeaways from today. And then the most popular here is communicating cyber risks to your board. So I think we'll put together some resources for that as well, that will sit alongside the webinar. So we'll do a webinar on that and talk it through, but also give you some material and collateral you can take away and use in your arguments, as I think that's the most potent, is understanding how to lay out especially to non-technical boards, how to lay out risk and why we're going through these stages. Great, I will share the results there. The most popular being human cyber risk, so we'll see that next month, hopefully. Great. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming along today. Is there any more questions? If not, then we'll be posting this recorded webinar, I think, in a couple of days, once we've mastered it, just to share some of our thoughts. And if you want to, take this away and maybe rewatch sections, I doubt you will, but hopefully that's been useful for you today. And thank you very much for joining me. And hopefully everyone's staying safe and comfortable at home. Great. Okay, thank you very much.